No one with more faith, more compassion, more vision, more virtue, more determination, more confidence than Jerry Falwell. A man who loved God with all of his heart and who loved people with all of his heart.
It's time for the great silent majority to stand up and be counted.
In 1979, the floundering, directionless United States was at a crossroads following the departure of famed Orthodox President Richard Nixon.
So we pray, O God, as we enter a new era.
The relationship between Nixon and famed preacher Billy Graham was a collaborative new effort in the early 1970s, a political religious union to shift the country's heartland to conservatism.
We've lost a great deal of confidence in some of our institutions. There's been a moral permissiveness that has frightened millions of people. Some deeper national yearning in the country.
Graham's in-your-face, fire and brimstone sermons spread wildly across network television, garnering national interest in an evangelist speaker. Of course, his endorsement of Nixon was ultimately only temporary. In order to utilize the Christian base on TV, the right needed to go back to the drawing board. From Lynchburg, Virginia, came a reverend with a vision.
We have a threefold primary responsibility. Number one, get people saved. Number two, get them baptized. Number three, get them registered to vote.
Only 55% of evangelicals were registered to vote at that time. The national mean at the time was 72%, so we had a lot to do there.
Moral Majority, a political fundraising group, was co-founded by Reverend Jerry Falwell in 1979. The purpose of the group was simple: spur born-again Christians to follow their beliefs into the voting booth. Word initially got out with a simple newsletter, mailed out from Washington.
In the latter 1970s, a decision was made to target a prominent, skilled religious communicator to see if he would start moving people into political participation.
That is when we began talking to various persons about forming some kind of entity.
The mainstream press in this country didn't really know what an evangelical was.
The Washington Post wrote that you have to understand that we don't know much about this sort of thing because we don't know any of these people.
Using Falwell's Gospel Hour on television and a weekly newsletter named Moral Majority Report, the organization's views were made public. An anti-liberal coalition of deeply concerned folk wishing to return America to sanity, anti-homosexual or pro-traditional, anti-censorship but anti-pornography. For our purposes, notice the language here for how the Moral Majority Report mentions censorship, but language remains intentionally vague as to what this poisonous sex-charged cesspool looks like on television. The Moral Majority Corporation was stancing itself to censor sexual or ungodly material on the airwaves while maintaining their own belief in the freedom of speech. All of this was helped by Falwell's close proximity to President Ronald Reagan, with whom he developed a close personal connection over the course of multiple presidential campaigns.
Your new government and selecting the people who are going to head the cabinet. How much consideration are you going to give to the advice of these new conservative organizations and the Moral Majority and people like the Reverend Jerry Falwell?
I am going to be open to these people. You are president of all the people, and I'm going to want to seek advice where I think that I can get advice from those who are familiar with a particular problem.
As a White House regular for 8 years, Falwell used his sway and position to implement a sweeping attack on a decades-old broadcasting law.
The Fairness Doctrine. That 1959 code requires broadcasters to afford reasonable opportunity for conflicting views on issues of public importance. Many broadcasters want the rule scrapped, and recently the Federal Communications Commission has tended to agree with them.
And I think if Christians will get out there and register and vote, they still have the opportunity to turn it around, but soon it'll be too late.
Oh, I'm just a flag-waving American who believes this land is the best.
If I was in Rhodesia, when it was Rhodesia, 2 months before it fell to the Marxist terrorist
I should
Mugabe.
warn we have 1 minute left.
And if you think Mugabe is running a free country, you've been on vacation for a while.
How did it fall? By an election?
Pardon?
How did it fall? By an election?
It fell by an election, but I can tell you exactly how it all occurred, and it's too long a story to do in 1 minute.
Meanwhile, the Moral Majority Report attempted to block out dirty media by using its influence in other ways. Reverend Jerry Falwell actively called for the boycotts against sexually charged or anti-Christian movies and shows, notably a nationwide strike against Dallas. Many households grew irate at this notion.
Boring, man. Ain't nothing good on TV no more. That's why I'm getting cable, you know? I'd like to come home after a hard day's work and see Aunt Margaret's breasts, or see Lonnie Anderson with some tight pants spread all over her butt. Right? Most normal men like that kind of stuff, but not Jerry Falwell, see? He'd rather sit home and watch some show about birds landing, right?
To religious right-wing voters, what Falwell had accomplished since Jimmy Carter was an achievement, cleaning up public TV and allowing freedom of their own personal liberty.
The attitude of the FCC has radically changed the last 7 years. It is no longer anti-broadcasting, but rather it is neutral and fair. We appreciate that very much.
Majority is not a religious organization. If it were, we could not get 72,000 pastors, which includes Jews, Protestants, Catholics, Mormons, fundamentalists, etc., together without a blood battle.
Because I felt we were stifling free speech, and that the government, contrary to the wishes of the founders who wanted neutrality as the policy of the government toward religion, in fact, the government was becoming hostile, in my opinion, towards religion. My college training for the ministry, I was instructed repeatedly, religion and politics do not mix. The premise, I suppose, theologically was that ideally, if we meet the spiritual needs of society, we automatically, as a side benefit, cure the political and social ills. Idealistically, that's a correct premise. But in reality, it doesn't work out that way.